pace is dropped on another edition of Soccer Down here. It's April 10th. It's a Friday. It's a Freestyle Friday. That's the hashtag you can use on Twitter if you've got really anything you want to get into. Fridays kind of go all over the place. So you want to go historical, you want to go current, you want to talk about what's happening in other parts of the world with the game. We've got plenty to dig into with that. Anything on your mind, tweet at us at Soccer Down here and let us know what you're thinking about this morning. John's got a bunch of news updates from across the pond, so let's hit it.
Okay, well, let me first go with Chris Hutchison, since we were discussing today. He says, does the concept of a week still exist?
Kind of. I'm trying to make sure it still does. I am a subscriber to the theory, and I feel like pretty much our whole lives are governed by theories at this point, and everybody's figuring it out as we go about every single possible thing. But in this case, I do subscribe to the theory that trying to maintain some kind of normal routine is very important. It's been helpful for me, so I'm trying to keep up with what day it is and act accordingly.
Yeah, me too, and started drifting outside about 2 o'clock and getting a couple of miles in every day, just so I don't go completely and totally stir crazy. So I've actually added that to my diet soda routine as well.
Wow, that's big time.
It is. And seeing what this rather large yellow and orange thing is out in the environment that's on the blue background, in front of a blue background, it's been kind of strange, actually.
John, it's been sunny most of this week. What are you talking about?
But you're assuming that I've been outside to see it, and now that I've got
called
these
windows.
Not here in Office HD.
Well, that's on you. If you want to live in the basement, that's up to you. But no, windows are nice. I like them.
Yes, windows are nice. All right, let's start with our friends at Sky.
Okay.
And there's a story from Sky Sports where a leading lawyer in Britain, player agent, says that FIFA's recommendations of contract extensions cannot be enforced under English employment law.
He might be right. I mean, it's a contract, and you're saying that the end date of the contract is not actually the end date. So, I mean, yeah, he could be right.
He said, Nick DeMarco, who has represented governing bodies, currently representing, full disclosure, he's representing the PFA during the coronavirus pandemic. He has represented governing bodies, players, clubs, and agents since 2002. And earlier this week, remember, FIFA proposed contracts are, quote, extended until such time that the season does actually end quote. And they asked for the same principle to be applied to contracts due to begin when the new season starts. DeMarco comes out to Sky and says legally they cannot be forced, players, to continue to play for the club. Nobody can force them to do so, FIFA, the FA, the club, or anybody else. If they want to walk away, that's a matter for them, but it will really be a matter of whether financially that makes sense for them. What you're most likely to see as a preferred option is probably very short-term extensions of contracts based on existing salary terms. Won't suit everyone, and it can't be forced on anyone in England.
No, that's logical. I don't think it can be forced on anybody. I mean, contract law is probably different country to country, but the basics of what's being said here are absolutely correct. I mean, you sign a contract for that contract to end on June 30th. Well, unless there's terms in the contract, which there could be in some, I don't know, about, if the end of the season is extended due to natural disaster or whatever, blah, 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 that the contract would be extended, at that time. I mean, if there's language in there to do that, then sure, then you're good. But if there isn't, it's going to take an agreement. And whether that's the Players Association in each country, individual clubs, or some players deciding to say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. But then the next thing, and this is where FIFA can work to enact what they want to do without actually completely being able to do it, you would change the transfer window. So if, let's say, John Jenkins is a player whose contract ends on June 30th. And John Jenkins is very unhappy with his club, and he wants to leave. Okay. He doesn't want to sign if it's a short-term extension, if it's whatever. If he wants to go fight this in the courts, fine, he can leave. But he can't go join another team that is currently playing because he can't join that team until the transfer window opens whenever it does. That could be September, that could be October. We don't know yet. That's going to be the way that FIFA can maybe not literally say, like, contracts are just extended because, no, they don't have that jurisdiction. But they can basically make it to where players would not want to leave and just sit on the sidelines because they can't move to another club yet. They can't be registered with another club yet.
Jan Vertonghen from Spurs has come out, and he has said publicly that, yeah, once my contract is done at the end of the year, then I should be able to leave on my own and not have to stay at Spurs. He has been one of the players.
Okay, but this is where we're getting into some nonsense, and I'm sorry if I'm Jose Mourinho and that's said, then I'm saying why don't you just go now? We're done. Bye. Because nobody's saying that at the end of the season you're going to be keeping a player who's out of contract. That's what the words that Vertonghen says there, that's what it's almost like alleging. No. If Vertonghen wants to walk at June 30th, he's within his right to do that. But if I'm FIFA and if I'm UEFA, I'm not allowing Vertonghen to go sign for somebody July 1st and play because we know there's going to be games then. Right? You know, I mean, if there's games, period, there would be seasons still active at that point. No, he can't do that. That's how you're going to have to combat this. And if he wants to walk on at June 30th because of whatever reasons, you know, him and Tottenham haven't got along, whatever, okay, bye. Like that's kind of ridiculous to have that stance at this point because it's not like Tottenham chose for games not to get played. I mean, if they didn't want to sign him at the end of his contract, well, then they're going to let him walk, period. It's not their choice that the season isn't going to be finished by that time. Like, that's a silly argument, and it's a silly stance to make publicly, and there's no value in it. And this goes back to what we've been saying from day one with all this. All of this is complicated. All of this is uncharted territory. And when you get these kinds of stances coming out publicly, you're just making it more complicated, and you're making it worse. You know, if Vertonghen doesn't want to play for Spurs when the season resumes,
bye.
If it's after June 30th, see ya. That's fine. But don't come out and make this kind of nonsense and start, like, implying things and trying to lead people to think one thing. No, nobody... Like, this whole thing about contracts being extended, it's not the evil club owners who are trying to get one over on their players. It's the fact the season hasn't ended. And contracts are generally based on when the seasons are done. So I understand the logic behind it. It's something we talked about from the beginning of all this. You know, do you want players to be out of contract before the season is over? In a perfect world, you don't. But in this case, FIFA cannot, unilaterally extend contracts. You're going to have to come to agreements. But FIFA can make the transfer windows prevent players from really moving. So if Vertonghen doesn't want to sign a short-term whatever to finish out the season, cool, he's out at June 30th, bye. And he can't go play for anybody until the next seasons start.
Right.
That's the way you work around it if you're FIFA. And people are going to have to get over themselves and work together for the common good of the game. Otherwise, we're going to have a bunch of nonsense that slows everything down. This is part of said nonsense.
DeMarco, about transfer windows, says, what would happen if the season couldn't start until August or September, which is quite possible.
Yeah.
If you didn't start the transfer window until after that, it could be very unfair to players who are going to be out of contract in June and don't want to sign the new contract. It could be
then sorry. That's the whole point. Sorry. Too bad. It could be very unfair. You're not going to have the transfer window while the seasons are being finished. That's ridiculous. Now, that's where you're overstepping your area of expertise. The agent, what he said about contracts, 100%. You cannot just say the contract's extended. Okay. But FIFA can control transfer windows and such. And no, the player agent has nothing here. This is a ridiculous argument that is just going to create another argument that is just going to slow everything down when people are trying to figure out something they have never been able to be through before. This is stupid. Yes, it's unfair. Well, there's a lot of things that are unfair. But you cannot have a player in, let's use Vertonghen as an example since he's put himself into that. Is the agent Vertonghen's agent?
I do not know. I can check really quickly.
I'm curious about that. But if Vertonghen doesn't want to sign that short-term extension and play for Spurs and finish out the season, that's fine. That's his prerogative. But no, it'd be really unfair for the transfer window doesn't start until August or September or October. Well, that's where we're at right now. Sorry, that's what you're going to have to deal with. You're not going to be allowed to then be a free agent on July 1st when teams have 9-10 games left and Inter and Juve are battling it out for the top of the Serie A, and they're able to go get reinforcements for the end of their season. That's changing the competitive integrity of the competition that has already started. That should not be allowed. And that's what FIFA can control.
Tom DeMull, for the record, is Vertonghen's agent.
Okay, good for him.
DeMarco finishes his thought on the transfer window. It could be very unfair to clubs who would be desperate, some of them, to release players. The real problem is going to be when the season is practically capable of restarting.
Well, duh. And that's why shut your mouth and let's wait till we know a little bit more before you start worrying about what's fair and not. Because nobody knows what's going to happen. Germany's trying to start at the beginning of May. Germany could be done with their season before Spain or Italy even restarts it. And I think that it is pretty well established that the best course of action for the European leagues is going to be to finish the current season. If they don't, you're opening up a Pandora's box of money you're going to have to give back or money you're not going to get from TV partners and potential, insolvency issues in a variety of countries, with clubs not having the money coming in to meet their current payroll. If they finish the current season, you're at least going to get all of your TV money from the current season. And at least you know what you have there. You're not going to have to give anything back from that. Yeah, there's a very good chance you'll play behind closed doors, so you're not going to have the gate revenue, but you might be able to monetize other aspects of games, even without fans, and bring in some extra revenue. If you just skip ahead to the next season, you're going to have TV contract issues. You are going to have a lot of other things. Yes, the transfer window would stay the same if you just skip ahead to the next season. Well, I think moving the transfer window is going to be an easier battle than fighting it out with all of your TV partners in your various countries. I think. I don't know. But I think that's going to be the better way forward. So already starting with what's fair and unfair, and players should be able to walk, and you can't enforce contracts. I'm with him on the legalities of the contract situation, but the rest of it, trying to bring fairness and unfairness into it, I mean, none of this is fair. None of this is fair for anybody involved. We're all trying to figure it out. So let's stop crying right now. If Vertonghen can't get along with Spurs and doesn't want to finish the year out, then he sits until the transfer window opens. That's how it goes.
DeMarco has a solution, and he says one possible solution that's been suggested is allowing players to sign pre-contracts. So if a club wants to keep a player, but the player doesn't really want to sign a 2-month contract because they've got an offer of 3 years somewhere else, they can sign the 3 years somewhere else, but it starts in 2 months' time. The problem with that is that you have all sorts of integrity issues. There's no easy solution. I don't think we'll really know what the solution is until we're closer to knowing when and how.
That's an idiotic argument at the end of it, because that already happens. What's the integrity issues of a player, of Ziyech from Ajax, who's already signed a pre-contract for Chelsea to start July 1st? Mm-hmm. That already happens. In the last 6 months of a player's contract, they can sign the pre-contract elsewhere. and they stay at their existing club unless a transfer is agreed upon. So that already happens. Like, that's an idiotic argument because that's already what happens in the game. So no, that would be the same, because you're still within that. You're still in that window. So if, for example, Vertonghen, wants to go ahead and sign a pre-contract with Inter, let's say he's going to go to Inter next season. Okay, he can do that. There's nothing stopping him from doing that. He can do that right now. And then if he wants to finish out the season for Spurs, or if he wants to sit on the sidelines, or if he doesn't want to play at all, he waits until that contract with Inter becomes active. That's it. That already happens. So that to say like that brings up questions. Well, that's kind of silly, because then you're questioning a lot of things that are already existing, and he's probably had clients who've taken advantage of that in the past.
And DeMarco, as a lawyer, might have taken advantage of that in the past with said fees that are attached to signing contracts.
Probably.
So, yeah. So that was Nick DeMarco with Sky this morning.
Good times.
We'd mentioned life and times in the championship, and after I give the update from the Daily Mail, Nathan Pugh has a question that's MLS based and U.S. soccer hemispheric based, and so we'll go there after.
Okay.
But the Daily Mail, and it was an article that was put out by Matt Hughes yesterday and then updated this morning. His lead sentence: championship clubs are facing a civil war with their players over wages and threatening to impose uniform cuts after the PFA rejected a plea from the EFL on Thursday for mediation. And so now there's a deadline of today to endorse proposals for league-wide cuts and deferrals, but sources tell Hughes that the Players' Union is going to reject that request.
So let's get this straight. Clubs who are facing pretty big issues with revenue.
Yep.
Want the players, and give me the rundown. What players are, what levels, what is this specifically referring to?
The championship.
This is just the championship.
Just the championship.
Where we already know that clubs have been poorly run, and you've got a lot of clubs who are probably in severe financial trouble. Yes,
and examples given in this article. Currently, Derby County, apologies to at Just Talks Footy, Reading, and Sheffield Wednesday were the three early examples in the article that were given.
What is the example that's given about those clubs?
Just that they are the ones that are in the deepest financial peril.
Okay.
That have been discussed. At least half a dozen championship clubs will struggle to pay this month's salaries if there are no cuts, according to the
half
article.
The league.
Quarter of the league, half a dozen.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So you're already to the point that you've got 6 of 24 that are going to have problems meeting their player payroll, not even getting into anything else, just the player payroll this month, if there are no cuts. Next month, that's going to be even more, and that's only going to continue. Look, the reality is no money's coming in, and it sucks, but it's the reality. And if the players can't get together with the clubs to figure this out, what's going to happen is the clubs are going to have to figure out whatever recourses they have legally. And does that mean administration? Does that mean, I don't know what kind of recourse they could have in laying players off. I mean, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know. But that's that's the door that's going to open. And that's like, there's nothing to avoid that. That's the thing that is, I guess, a little frustrating when this keeps coming up. Does anybody want to take a pay cut? No, of course not. You want to earn every dollar from the contract you signed as a player. Totally understand it. This is not normal times. This is not because the club just, did some of these clubs run themselves poorly beforehand? Yeah, they did. But this reason is not because of that. This is not just the end of a regular season and, man, we're doing poorly and we're not going to get promoted and get that golden ticket. So, yeah, we can't pay you what we signed you to. No, that's wrong. That's a whole nother issue. That's not happening here. This is something that no one could have foreseen that has caused this and will potentially have a bigger effect when you start getting into TV and other types of payments that are either not going to happen or are going to have to be returned. So, I don't know, but that's the reality, and it's something I think the players have to face. You know, they might not get their money, period, because clubs might not be able to give it to them. So is it better for the players to just say, well, screw it, we're not going to give anything back, and we're going to ride this out, and we'll get what we get whenever we can get it, and potentially put clubs out of business, which is just, I mean, it's a fact. It's a fact. I mean, Sheffield Wednesday is a club that, used to be a Premier League club. And if they're struggling financially at championship level, and they were not looking at promotion, and I don't think they were realistically looking at that possibility happening.
No.
I mean, they're stretched already. This is, potentially their breaking point. And it's a club with, a huge amount of history. And they might not exist after this. If that's where the players as a whole want to go and expect that, well, if Sheffield Wednesday goes out of business, there'll be a new club that pops in there that has that kind of money. It's not going to happen. It's just not. I don't think that how many professional teams in England are we talking about between the Premier League, the Championship, League One, League Two? It's over 90 teams, just under 100 if I remember right. 96. Okay, 92, 96, somewhere in it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be that number at the end of this.
Nope.
I don't. Not without government support, not without somebody stepping in and saving the ones that are in peril. So, is there a bunch of clubs below that are going to be able to survive this first off and then step up into that level and pay the same type of wages? No, there's not. There's not. So, I mean, that's the reality that I think the players have to face. And it sounds like they're not really understanding that at times. In England, for example, other countries it seems to be different, but in England it's like, no, we're not going to give anything back. If the club fails, the club fails. Well, you're not going to have as many job opportunities. That's the problem. I mean, I would think that for guys who are under longer term contracts, and this is just me talking, I would think that the easiest approach would be to defer money to the back end of the contract, hope that things change by then, but give clubs a little more breathing room right now when they're not bringing in any revenue. It's not like somebody's being greedy here and pocketing money. There's no money to pocket. So if you're under a longer contract, deferring it would seem to make more sense. If you're under a shorter contract, then I get it's probably a different conversation for you. If you have got, let's say 18 months going back to January, if you've got the rest of the season and next season under contract, yeah, you're probably going to want all of your money that you can get. And that's a little more understandable. But for guys who are under contract past that, it feels like you would be better off working with the club to help them survive what's going on now, and you're going to get more money in the long term that way if things work out. There's no guarantee, but that would help. I don't know. That's the fear that I have looking at this when I hear these kind of things, is that short-term dollars are going to affect the long-term viability of some of these clubs that already had that long-term viability in question. So is that good for the game? I don't think it is. I don't think it's good for the players in the long run. It's a different conversation if you're a 35-year-old at the end of your career, get every dollar you can get. If you're a 24-year-old and you're not going to be a Premier League player, you're going to be a championship level talent, a League One level talent, you need places to play. And if clubs go away, and I mean, let's just follow the line here. If you get to a point where you have to shrink the championship down to 20, and maybe even shrink the divisions below that down a little bit, if you get to those situations, you're not going to have as many jobs available. And if you're a player who's, in between levels, and if you're in a championship now, you might be on League One wages the next year. And not League One wages right now, League One wages in the new world, which are probably going to be more like League Two wages. I mean, those are the things that are coming without finding ways to work together. Those things could come even if you do work together. We don't know yet. But if you're not going to work together, those are the things that you're staring in the face at. And I don't think it does anybody any good here to hold this hard line and not find a way to work together. It's going to hurt the game. It's going to hurt everybody involved in it. And it's going to hurt the people who are not directly involved in it, but get a lot out of it as the fans. It's going to hurt these communities if these things continue to happen. They've got to get over themselves and find a way to work together, because now is the time that everybody has to do that.
Derby, Reading, and Sheffield Wednesday, for the record, are all pretty much mid-table. Derby's 12th, Reading's 14th, and Sheffield Wednesday's currently 15th. But also when it comes to players, don't think word's not going to get out for a double negative this early in the morning. If a player is a part of that group that doesn't want to negotiate some kind of a deferral with your current club, and if you're looking for work later on, word's going to get around from front office to front office. Oh, yeah, you were one of those guys who didn't want to negotiate with your old club in the old world. Why should I have you as a part of my club if you acted that way previously with an old club? So, I mean, you could be giving yourself a negative rap on your CV if you're looking for work later on, too.
Easily. If you're not a top player, you could be putting that at risk. And just not being able to be at the same level and be close to the same wages. I think this is a huge wake-up call for a lot of people involved in the game in Europe, because the money's not going to be the same. The salaries are not going to be the same. The transfer fees are not going to be the same. It's going to be a different world. And that's going to have effects from the top to the bottom. Your big clubs are not going to be as big. They're not going to be able to spend crazy amounts on salary and crazy amounts on transfer fees. Your smaller clubs are either not going to exist or are going to be smaller. And that's going to have an effect on, places for players to play and develop, and, places for some of these smaller communities to have their local team. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to go into this that it's just the reality we're all facing.
In the championship, several clubs have proposed, once again, this is back to the Daily Mail article, several clubs have proposed taking collective action to impose a pay cut of 50% on all wages above £6,000 a week, half of which would be deferred, but reaching an agreement with all 24 clubs is proving difficult. Leeds and Birmingham reached agreements with their players to defer a portion of their wages for the duration of the crisis. Leeds actually said that what they would do for players is give them a 2%, basically like a 2% commission on the other side. You get a 2% raise off of your catch
so
the check.
Give you more to defer it.
Yeah, they give you 2%.
They're not just deferring money; they're giving you more money if you defer it.
Right. Yeah, that's what Leeds
basically like an interest kind of payment.
Yeah.
Like you would have made this, you're going to make it later, but here's some extra money for you.
Yeah, 2% for Leeds. Players deferring a portion of their wages. Millwall have put their entire first team squad on furlough. Derby, Nottingham Forest, Swansea, Cardiff, QPR have all put non-playing staff on furlough, with others set to follow.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in England, you're probably past the time that you're going to get the leagues to actually do something from top to bottom. I think it's just too far gone. It's going to be down to the individual clubs and individual groups of players, and that's probably going to have more success anyway. I mean, we talked about it with Real Madrid. When you have a figure at Real Madrid like Sergio Ramos, and he's leading the discussions from the player side, you're going to have more buy-in. I mean, Sergio Ramos is Real Madrid through and through, and he's going to be looking out for his fellow players, but he's also looking out for the club, so he can see both sides of it. You're not going to get that in a league discussion because players don't have any affinity for the league. They have an affinity for their club, especially if they've been there a while. So that's where it's going to go. So both sides. I mean, the clubs wanting to do a 50% pay cut and defer some. No, that's not where you start with this. It should have started with a deferral of pay to later in contracts, and guys who are on shorter term deals that are left, then you try to pay them out and you start working from there. Both sides came in way too strong, and both sides, predictably fought back on that, and now you're not going to get anything done. It's too far gone. I mean, if you've already got clubs that have put their staff on furlough, and clubs that are already putting players on furlough, like you're too far gone with it. The league's not going to be able to do this, so stop wasting your time.
Which lends itself to the question from Nathan Pugh this morning. And he says, building on yesterday, with insolvency and high turnover clubs being in trouble, I believe this will further the status quo with single entity in the U.S. and no pro-rel. Do you think this is the final nail in the pro-rel argument?
In the U.S., I think I think that nail's already been there, but I don't know if it changes that conversation for the people who have not seen the nail. In other countries, it's a different conversation, and I want to get into that in a second. But in the United States, let's work from top to bottom. You've got Major League Soccer, which as a single entity is probably best structured to deal with these types of things. They're going to take a hit too, and individual owners, individual clubs are going to take a hit. Like nobody's going to be spared from taking a financial hit in this. But MLS is able to spread it around a little bit. Your weaker clubs financially are going to be better off in the MLS system because the stronger clubs help them in that regard. So they'll weather it better. USL Championship's not set up that way. USL League One's not set up that way. NISA's not set up that way. Nobody else in the United States is set up that way. NWSL's not set up that way. So we'll get to NWSL on that side in a minute. USL Championship, I would assume that your second teams are fine if your first teams are, but could you see some clubs decide to scrap their second team because of this? Yeah, it could happen. I think those are clubs that are either in more or individual ownership groups that are in more financial peril because that's not coming from, a second team the single entity doesn't help you with. So if Philadelphia is one we've talked about as an ownership group that's not as resourced as others. Could the effects of the shutdown cause them to question the investment in, Philadelphia Union 2, formerly Bethlehem Steel? It could. It absolutely could. I think long term, and we've talked about this with the second teams in general, I think they're vital because that's where players get to play. That's where a Miles Robinson got to develop. That's where a Brendan Aronson got to develop. It's a very important part of development. Hopefully clubs are going to be able to weather that and keep those. But could you see a few go away? It wouldn't surprise me. Independent USL Championship teams, they're taking a hit on this. And we don't know, club to club, what their financials look like, how comfortable they're able to handle this. You take, a Louisville City, for example, that was building a stadium and ready to have it open. And that's a lot of money that went into something that you're not going to get anything back from it yet. That hurts. And are you going to be okay? I would think so, because if you're resourced enough to build the stadium, you've probably got some contingencies to handle this kind of thing.
Yeah, you should be able to restructure things.
You would think.
If force majeure. Yeah.
You would think. But we see it happen at times when a club or a business, undergoes an expansion and then there's an immediate downturn in the market. Well, they're caught in a vulnerable position. I think Louisville's ownership is fine. I'm not too worried about it. Could they maybe try to put the start of the NWSL team back a year to give them a little more time to get back up to speed? They could. Those are the types of trickle-downs that are going to affect it. So, from a pro-rel conversation in the United States, that nail was already there, in my opinion, but I don't know if this changes the people who bang that drum that's the way it should go, if it changes it. It should, because I don't think promotion and relegation in the United States makes sense until the second division is closer to the first in financial terms, not in quality terms, in financial terms. I don't think they're close either way right now. I think there is a big gap between the USL Championship on a day-to-day basis, not in a one-off like an Open Cup game, but even those. I mean, you don't see USL Championship teams across the board beat MLS teams with regularity. There's a reason for that. There's a gap. Financially, the gap's even bigger, I think. So it doesn't make any sense to promote teams up who can't handle the increased expenditure at the next level. It doesn't make sense to relegate teams down and make them smaller when they could be bigger in the first division as MLS is currently structured. I don't think that does anything good for the game. I love the great storylines that come from promotion relegation. I love the romanticism of it. From a business perspective, it's going to make less sense after this because that gap's going to get bigger. In other countries, and this is where it gets interesting for the pro-rel kind of zealots that, well, because everybody else does it, the U.S. should do it too. I would not be surprised if you see short-term halts to promotion relegation in a lot of countries.
Yep.
It's something that we're going to explore probably over the next week, and we're still figuring out exactly how it looks. The closest comparison from a league structure and financial hit that we have to compare this to is post-World War II. The leagues in various countries around the world after World War II. And you had clubs you had leagues that did that, because you had leagues that had to combine their first and second division. You had clubs that went away, you had clubs that went on hiatus, you had clubs that merged. I mean, everything was on the table at that point because it was a catastrophic effect on the league, similar to this one. Different reasons, obviously, but the effects, there's some similarities. So you've already seen some things floated about, well, the Premier League would go to 24 teams because they wouldn't relegate anybody, and then you'd do it the next year. It's not going to be easy to have a traditional promotion relegation at the end of the 1920 season. It might not be easy to have it at the end of the 2021 season, depending on the effects there. So I think it's far more likely that fewer leagues around the world have a promotion relegation system that looks like it does today for at least a couple of years. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what the long-term effects are. But in the United States, this makes it even harder to do because the gap's bigger. In other countries, it could force them to put a stop to it for a while because clubs aren't going to be ready to handle those jumps either way at that time. So the NWSL side of it, and we mentioned it, that's another independent league that, the women's game has been growing very quickly, but you're not talking about the same type of resources. In the NWSL or the Women's Super League or any, rising women's professional soccer league, they're going to take a hit too. And my fear is that, just like I said about Philadelphia Union and Philadelphia Union 2, would clubs who invest in their women's team and have seen returns from it, would they say, we're taking a hit at the core business right now, we don't have the extra money to invest? That could happen, either to where teams go on hiatus, or I think the better possibility would be just budgets are cut. And it's just something you're going to have to weather a little bit till things get back to a stable position. And we'll have to see how that gets handled, because the women's game will be affected by this as well, just because the business is not as strong on that side yet. And I hope that it is still seen as a priority. because I think it's becoming a bigger priority for a lot of clubs around the world to properly invest in their women's team, and I hope that doesn't go away.
No, and we've seen the growth in the NWSL and in the women's game in general in the country over the last handful of years, and you don't want to see that kind of thing go away.
But money's money. I mean,
yes,
but
and the
that's
bottom line.
the flip side. Yeah, the bottom line is the bottom line, and if teams were investing in that, because it's an investment right now, you're not seeing the return across the board yet on that. It's an investment, and when you don't have as much money to work with, it's harder to make that investment. The Braves and the Atlanta Chiefs, like, that's what happened at the end of the first run of the Atlanta Chiefs. The second run, same situation, but different players involved. The Atlanta Braves in 1972 were not making much money, if any. I don't think they were making. I think they were losing it. So even though, if you look at the Atlanta Chiefs from 1967 to 1972, they were the third longest running of the original professional soccer teams in 1966-67 that formed. Dallas Tornado went to 1981. The St. Louis Stars went to 77. The Chiefs getting to 72 were the third longest running one. They lost, at the time, what was reported was around $1.5 million over that 66 startup year, playing in 67 through 72. They lost over half of that in the first 2 years. So they had kind of stabilized a bit by the time you got to 69, 70, 71, 72. They'd cut costs. It was, pretty bare bones. They weren't really losing a bunch of money, but the parent company, the Braves, were. And they eventually sold a few years later. They couldn't invest in something else. They had to protect the core business. The second version of the Chiefs, it was bought by Ted Turner. Ted Turner's money fronted it anyway. A big reason why was TV programming for what was becoming the Superstation, Channel 17. That was why Turner invested in buying the Colorado Caribous and bringing them to Atlanta. Well, 3 years later, you had not seen any return on the gate. You weren't drawing fans. The indoor side was actually doing really well, but the outdoor side wasn't drawing that. The programming, it was programming. It wasn't getting big ratings. It was just programming, which was a need, but it wasn't delivering much of anything. And at that point, 1981, what was getting started around that time in the Turner Empire? Something called CNN. You needed to put the money into that. You couldn't put it into soccer anymore. And by that point, the NASL was on the backside of their glory days. So you had to pull the investment because it didn't make sense because of the core business. That's going to affect women's teams for clubs. That's going to affect second teams for MLS clubs. That's going to affect academies. It's going to have a trickle-down effect because the core business is going to be hurt by this.
And obviously, it's a crash course for fans in Economics 101 and vertical integration of businesses and where finances may or may not be when we come out the other side of this whole thing.
Yep.
We got some stuff in the Premier League.
What we got?
We got from the Daily Mirror, a part of the Premier League plan looks like it could have coronavirus testing machines available at their training grounds to test players for the virus every day, as the British government has pledged more equipment will be in general use by the end of the month. It would allow clubs to strictly monitor their players as they begin plans to restart training, with some looking at resuming mid-May, with the idea that games may start in June. Clubs have told their players to expect to return to training next month. Get your vacations and furloughs in now, I guess. A mini preseason of 2 to 3 weeks, start playing again in June, and then the games left in a 4 or 5 week period.
Yeah, don't get your vacations in. Don't tell the players to do that. Kyle Walker might get in trouble again.
Oh, no.
None of that. Stay home. No vacations. Stay home.
No vacations.
As testing becomes easier to do, which is happening, I think, every day, kind of making progress in that regard. Yeah, if you're going to get back to playing, it's going to be a necessity. Clubs are going to have to prepare for that. So I'm not surprised by that. What was it that stopped professional sports in the United States? Rudy Gobert.
Yep.
It was Rudy Gobert testing positive, and then how many teams were going to have to go into a quarantine after that. That's what shut it down. Because the NBA earlier that day, and this is stuff that I've talked to Mike Conti about. He's going to join us here in about 15 minutes, by the way.
Cool.
Rachel Nichols had a great piece, I think it was at Newsday, talking about the return of the NBA show The Jump on ESPN and how they're doing it remotely. But she said the same, that day, that Wednesday, when we were in Mexico City for Atlanta United and Club America, the NBA was prepared to go behind closed doors starting the next day. That had been agreed upon. That all changed when Rudy Gobert tested positive. That shut it all down. So if you're going to get back into action, now that first period of training, it does two things. I mean, one, you get back into fitness and shape to finish out the season, but two, it gives you some time. If a player tests positive in that regard, okay, then that team's going to have to shut down. But you've got a month or so, if you're doing your training in that way, to do everything you have to do from a health perspective, but maybe not derail the start of the season, or it might derail it for a team. You're not doing what happened with the NBA, where Rudy Gobert tests positive. He would have been playing that night. He played other teams in previous days in that 14-day window that everybody focuses on. So those teams had to shut down too. If somebody tests positive at the start of this training period, okay, you can shut that team down. He's not going out to play somebody and potentially infecting another team that could then infect another team. You see what I'm saying? Like the NBA playing, not daily but multiple times a week, it's harder for them to deal with this. Soccer won't quite be like that, but you'll still, if other teams get affected, then you're affecting the league schedule. You've got to do that testing. That is critical to be able to control it as you start to ramp back up. Probably for the greater population as well. So the more testing becomes widespread, the more you can isolate, the more you can treat, the more you can move forward without shutting everything down. But it's a fear that I think everybody has right now, and it's probably driving the conversation of don't play any games until there's no risk. That's going to be hard to do. And is there a way to do it before you get to that point? Perhaps, if it's done correctly. We don't even know if that's true. But this kind of testing is going to be vital because it's the only way to try to get back to action. You've got time on the training side to handle anything that might come up and prepare to play games in mid-June if that's the idea that the Premier League has at this point. If that's the timeline you're working on right now, okay, that makes sense.
Next meeting for the Premier League to continue to update folks inside the league is set for next Friday, so hopefully we can have some more news out of the Premier League and their next steps and thoughts next week at this time. But yeah, when you were mentioning Rudy Gobert, the story that stuck into my head was Carolina Hurricanes play-by-play guy John Forsland. Mm-hmm. And John tested positive for coronavirus and had to go into quarantine for 2 weeks because he stayed in Rudy Gobert's hotel room in Detroit. And they were like, okay, you and the team videographer, you guys need to self-quarantine, and now we're going to, take you back home, and you guys can monitor it there. But, yeah, just the impact that one person can have on all of this. And that was because you stay in a hotel room, he was alerted, and that was when it all came down for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of all this. So to get back to action, there's a lot of things that have to be done from a testing side, but there's a lot of things that have to fall into place as well, and we will see where it goes.
Cool stuff from Manchester United. Harry Maguire has supplied essential food packages to pensioners in his native Sheffield. He wanted to do something to help elderly residents unable to go out because of the pandemic in the village of Mossborough, where he grew up. He arranged for the packages to be distributed to those aged 70 and over, and has chosen 2 local businesses to deliver them to those in need, also taking that next step in supporting the local community. It's a part of the hashtag Players Together movement, where players are donating part of their salaries to the NHS.
You've seen a lot of this with a lot of different clubs around the world, and it's always needed, I think, across the board, and it's always well received, and it just goes back to the power that clubs can have on their communities.
Shiva says, wouldn't it be great if rapid testing becomes as rapid as passing through metal detectors, then fans are allowed in the stadium too?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's probably one of the hopes. The fever thing and temperature is something that a lot of people have done. I mean, if the government's doing that at press briefings, testing the temperature of everybody who comes in, media, staff, everybody, is that good enough? Does it have to be more than that? I don't know. And this is beyond me. I do not have the expertise to be able to tell you one way or the other, but that's one thing that has been done. And would that work? Could you do that from a metal detector kind of thing? Could you do that as people enter a stadium, or do you need the handheld scanners that people use? I don't know. I don't know what the logistics of it are, but yeah, those are things that I know right now it's easy to be overwhelmed by all of it, but those are things that have to start to be discussed by teams in sports, by colleges who are going to have hundreds of people in a classroom, schools across the board, large office buildings. It's stuff that you're going to have to start to think through as we figure it all out.
Couple of notes out of Barcelona this morning.
Okay.
You want to get it? You want to get into Messi, since when I mentioned that one, you'd known about. You want to do fake news, or do you want to do the board? Which one?
Let's talk about Messi. Let's save that. Let's talk about the board first, because I don't know as much about this one.
Okay, and that was why I asked. I didn't know if you wanted to go about Messi first, but after we've been discussing everything with Barcelona and how much of a mess the front office is, a day after reports, and this is from our friends at Pro Soccer Talk, and friend of the network, Nick Mendola, he says, a day after reports that President Josep Maria Bartomeu asked 4 board members to leave the club, those 4 and 2 others have resigned and are calling for new leadership. Marca has translated the letter signed by Rousseau, Tombas, Elias, Pont, Teixidor, and Calsamiglia. The first 4 were asked to leave. Teixidor and Calsamiglia joined them. That leaves 13 board members left for Barca. Here's the translation of their note. We ask that once the results of the audit entrusted to PwC are presented, all responsible to be swept away with the eventual corresponding compensation. As a last service to our club, we recommend that as soon as circumstances allow it, to call new elections to allow to direct the club with all the authority and in the best possible way in the face of important challenges of the most immediate future.
See, it's very complicated, and it's probably not all really known at this point. ESPN FC has a piece going into a little more detail. Rousseau, who was one of the 6 who resigned, he suggested on Friday, that would have been this morning, that someone inside the club, quote, had their hands in the till. And he said he couldn't be sure who that was. Barcelona, obviously not happy with that kind of comment being made. They released a statement quickly and said, in light of the serious and unfounded allegations made this morning, FC Barcelona categorically deny any action that could be described as corruption and therefore reserve the right to take the necessary legal action. in February, this all goes back to, remember that story about the third-party company that was hired by Barcelona to smear players and potential presidents?
Yeah,
and,
on social media
club
and all
legends,
that,
the president at the time denied any knowledge of it, rescinded the contract with that company, i3 Ventures. Now, Rousseau, after his resignation, said on Thursday that the value of the contract with this i3 Ventures was inflated and had been broken down to avoid internal controls. And he added that an executive, someone not on the board of directors, had been making money on the deal. So the audit that was mentioned, that's what it is. Barcelona have ordered that external audit to try to, I guess, get more information. You've had infighting on the board for a while. It's nothing new. This has just, made it bigger. The whole stuff with Lionel Messi has played into this. His contract, which gets renewed every year and usually goes up every year, that's going to be an issue going forward. And two, you've had a lot of breakdown in the relationship across the board. Now, Messi, we'll talk about the other side of what Messi said. Messi said that there's nothing to the idea of him going to enter. Like he said, that's fake news. I don't know. The president, a source said the president wants to surround himself with people he trusts on the board. It's these politics of clubs in Spain, because you're dealing with boards, and at Barcelona you don't have, an owner. It's a different structure, so the board is critical. And the politics of it, it's been there going back to the Johan Cruyff days. Cruyff was hired by Barcelona because the president wanted to win the next election to keep his role. And he turned to Cruyff, even though he didn't really get along with Cruyff. He turned to him because he is a legend as a player. He's a legend, from the Netherlands outside of his time with Barcelona. And he knew that it would win over the fans. And by the time that it turned, after Cruyff had a lot of success, that relationship, which wasn't strong to begin with, broke down. He's forced out. You've seen a lot of moves at Barcelona because of politics, as opposed, and not like government politics, individual like club politics. You've seen a lot of moves there based on that, as opposed to proper business. So we will see where this goes on the Barcelona side. We'll get into the rest of it with Lionel Messi on the other side, because there's some interesting elements to that. But while we get Mike Conti on the line, John, why don't you tell us about Apolinsky and Associates?
I could certainly do that. aa-legal.com, Atlanta trial attorneys to help you out in knowledgeable, compassionate, and successful trials when it comes to wrongful death, personal injury. Trial lawyers, they can help you. Neglect, negligent security, wrongful death, catastrophic injuries. Preeminent personal injury law firm that handles catastrophic injury and wrongful death cases throughout Georgia and Alabama. And Stephen Apolinsky has been recognized as one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia. You can reach out to Steve at Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. You can request a free consultation and get a free case evaluation, or give them a call at 404-377-9191. You can even go onto the website at aa-legal.com and start a live chat with someone who can help you out possibly when it comes to getting your case evaluated. So Apolinsky and Associates, LLC, trial lawyers for cases here in Georgia and Alabama. Tremendous sponsor for Soccer Down Here and the SDH Network and everything that we have been doing since day one. 32 years of experience, over $40 million in verdicts and settlements, serving in Georgia and Alabama. How'd that work?
Pretty good. I'm hoping that after Mike Conti destroys everybody in the Dukes and Bale tailgate challenge today, they don't need to call Steve Apolinsky.
I'm trying to think of something I could sue someone over right now, because I need some money.
That's what I'm saying.
the money's kind of dried up. So and I'm trying to think back to anyone who's wronged me within the last 5 years, if I can get Steve to maybe work a successful lawsuit for me.
Steve's good. He could do it.
Oh, I know. Well, unfortunately, Steve probably only represents people with actual suable things as opposed to made-up things. So I might be a little bit stuck in this regard.
So, what is the plan for you today for the Dukes and Bell Grillapalooza? Do we know yet?
I'll reveal. So I went and got some oysters, and we're going to do an oyster roast. Now, I didn't go crazy because Leanne is not a big seafood fan. So, I mean, I'm eating all the seafood.
Another reason why Leanne and I are of the same mind.
Yeah, all I would say is you guys don't know what you're missing. But so, I went to Whole Foods last night. They had oysters. I got really excited because, look, it's Good Friday. I've been grilling a lot of red meat on Fridays, and that's something I'll repent for on my deathbed. But on Good Friday, I felt like I had to do seafood. So they had oysters at Whole Foods. I got really, really excited, and I asked the fishmonger which variety of oyster do you think would be best for me to roast? And he goes, well, I would do these ones. And he points to some pretty nice-looking oysters on the right side of the case. And I look at the card, farm-raised oysters from West Virginia.
Okay.
I did not purchase those.
Excellent play, sir.
I have trust issues with any type of mollusk or seafood that's going to come from West Virginia.
A landlocked mollusk, I could have issues with.
Yeah, no, not going to happen. So I got some oysters from Rhode Island, and I got a lobster tail and some sea scallops. So it's going to end up being kind of a seafood bake, but I'll roast the oysters. I mean, they're only going to take a couple minutes. I'll smoke a lobster tail. That's only going to take a couple minutes. And then I'll grill some sea scallops, and that's only going to take a couple minutes. Mm-hmm. So it'll be kind of the candy of the sea this evening at the Conti household. And hopefully it'll turn out okay.
The Casa de Conti
sounds good.
And freestyle grilling doing seafood.
John, did you change your setup, by the way? You sound different to me today. You sound good.
Yeah, it is.
Not that you sounded bad before, but you sound better.
Yeah, no, what I have decided to do, in addition to banging on my laptop and letting the entire world know when I'm actually tweeting during a show.
Yes, punching holes in a 74 Buick, as Nick Alifi said.
Yes. What I've done is I've gone from the setup of doing it over the phone and sitting at my desktop is doing it off of the laptop and a headset. So that's where it's a little different, but the downside is the world hearing me going like this.
That's okay. When you're not doing that, you sound really good.
There you go.
Yeah. And maybe you can find the mute button next time.
So, hey, before we really get going, I'm sorry I missed the watch along last night. I had a late conference call, a late dinner, and I was going to call in, and wouldn't you know, I fell asleep on the couch. So I apologize. Can you help jog my memory on something though, because I'm too lazy to look it up. If the U.S. men's national team had won their group, they would have had a way tougher round of 16 draw than Mexico, right?
They would have played Italy.
That's it, right. I was trying to remember who they would have played if they won their group. But now, as it turned out, South Korea beat Italy anyway, right?
Well, they did. That is true. There are a lot of allegations about how they beat Italy, and I'm sure Nick Alifi is breaking everything within reach of his hands at the moment. There has been a request from our good friend Jimmy Vance for a watch-along of that game, South Korea-Italy 2002.
Well, was that the game that got, what's his name, Park, basically a job in the Premier League for 10 years? He probably got that before because he should have got a job in MLS for 50 years because his goal against Portugal put the U.S. in. Right, exactly. Because the U.S. got killed by Poland on that final day of group play. And I want to say even Brad Friedel may have saved a penalty to keep the scoreline from being even worse. That was the Jeff Agnew game, if I remember correctly. It's so weird how things work out where sometimes if you don't win the group, you end up in better shape. And it's weird even for Italy. You know, Italy goes to the World Cup final in 94. they missed everything in '98, right? They didn't even qualify.
No, they were there in '98. Italy was in '98.
When did they have a World Cup where they? Well, I mean, other than the most recent World Cup, I feel like they missed. Didn't they miss somewhere? Like '90, they were the host. '94, obviously, they went to the final. But I feel like they missed a World Cup somewhere in there. Obviously, it wasn't. And this is my point. 4 years later, they go back and they win it all. So, what looked to have been a disaster in 2002 turned out to be as good as it gets 4 years later. Why do I think, though, they missed a World Cup? I don't
think they did.
Did they miss a Euro? Is that
that's possible?
Yeah,
maybe that's what I'm thinking of. That they missed a Euro.
Yeah, they might have missed a European Championship somewhere in there. This game, the South Korea-Italy game, would actually be kind of a fun one to go back and watch from a referee perspective, because you've had articles. Planet Football did one, a forensic analysis of Byron Moreno's refereeing in Italy versus South Korea.
Yeah,
Moreno is from Ecuador. He did this match, and he has been raked over the coals for a number of decisions in it. And his career went downhill a little bit afterwards. He got suspended for 20 matches and investigated by Ecuadorian football authorities after a game there. FIFA investigated him due to controversies in Japan, Italy, and South America over the past few months. This is the fall after the World Cup. His third game back from suspension in 2003, he got suspended again because he sent off 3 players from one team in a match and retired the following month.
Shocker. I'm
it gets better.
3 off and I'm out.
No, it gets better. In September of 2010, at JFK International Airport in New York City, he was arrested while trying to smuggle in 6 kilograms, over 13 pounds of heroin, which was hidden in his underwear.
Oh, what? Wow. Well,
I wouldn't want to touch that heroin.
No. So, in other words, this guy makes Hugh Dallas look like Howard Webb.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, honestly, if you think back to that 2002 World Cup, if there is VAR in that World Cup, at the very least, the USA is going to penalties against Germany, if not getting into the last 4. If there's VAR in that, well, of course, I'm assuming that, Landon Donovan or whoever would have taken the penalty would have converted it. And of course, I'm talking about Torsten Frings and the handball.
Yeah.
If there's VAR in that World Cup, the USA might have been playing on the final weekend, either the final or the third place game. And if you go back, and it's still online, you have to look for it a little bit, Googling, but if you go look at the European press accounts of that USA-Germany match, especially the British accounts, it's pretty much unanimous that the European press felt like the USA deserved to win that match.
It's the best performance the U.S. men's national team has ever had, in my opinion. It has not been topped since.
Either that or the way they played against Spain in 2009. That would be the only other one I could think of that would be close. They played really, really well. I think it was a Friday morning. They played really, really well that morning. And I still think of Tony Sane there at the very end, just grazing the outside of the post, a goal that would have put the match in extra time, and then who knows. It really, that was a magical World Cup. That was a really, really fun World Cup, and it just kind of symbolizes the Charlie Brown nature of the U.S. men's national team, where they have this incredible World Cup run, where they just absolutely dominated Portugal before taking their foot off the gas. They played a cracking match against South Korea in a incredible atmosphere. They dominated Mexico, the match you watched last night, and they played well enough to beat Germany and get into the final weekend. And all the matches were played in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the Charlie Brown nature of the U.S. men's national team, where they do everything right and they have a performance that should really galvanize the country and create so many new soccer fans. And they still did, but it created so many new soccer fans. And I'll even take it back 2 years before that, when they had that great run in the Sydney Olympics. same thing.
Yeah.
These matches are played in the middle of the night on like MSNBC and CNBC, and no one can watch. And that was, you're coming off that horrendous performance in France in 1998 with Steve Sampson, and you feel like your men's national team is just kind of adrift. The women's national team is winning World Cups and doing all these great things, and you have this run from late 1999 through early 2003, maybe even a little bit beyond that, where you're playing some of the best national team soccer we've ever had in this country, and it's all in time zones where you can't watch the match live. Just, what are you going to do? I guess you just shrug.
But it did have a huge impact on MLS because you think
enormous.
To 2002, that was the year that Miami Fusion, Tampa Bay Mutiny had been consolidated,
right.
And you're down to 10 teams again. And you had, in the game last night, it was one of the questions that came up, was how many MLS players were in this team. About half of the roster was MLS, and about half of the lineup for any given match was MLS. And it showed how important the strong domestic league was. Like 98, it was so quick, you didn't really have much of an MLS effect there. But 2002, you did, and it kind of reignited the interest in it.
Well, and I remember when those players all came back, like when DeMarcus Beasley came back and Landon Donovan came back, and it really made me interested in MLS just in the completion of that 2002 season. And I think they even adopted the slogan like New Soccer Nation or something like that right after that World Cup. Right? I probably don't have that exactly right, but I do remember that. And MLS certainly was in a position to capitalize off that. And you are so right. I mean, probably the reason why it was a crash and burn in 1998 is because while MLS existed, it did not have the strength or the depth that it had even 4 years later. And I'm even trying to remember back to that 98 team. I don't think there were too many MLS players in that team other than, I know Preki was in that team. I don't really remember a lot of MLS players on that 98 team. I could be mistaken. I know
there was a decent bit, but it was the end of that generation, too. I mean, you had Lawless, you had Balboa, you had... I don't think Winaldo was part of that. No, he was. He was. So Winaldo was there.
Winaldo was definitely part of the 98 team.
McBride was, and he was probably the one who emerged in MLS the most.
Right.
98, I'm pulling it up right now. You had a lot of MLS guys, but it was the older guys for the most part. Like Frankie Haydock, Eddie Pope, emerged in MLS. They were 23 and 24. Mike Burns was 27 with the Revs. Dooley had come to MLS by that point at 36 with Columbus.
But in the huge twilight of his career.
Wegerle was 34 with Tampa Bay at the end of his career. Tab Ramos was 31. Jeff Agus was 30. Preki was 34. Balboa was 30. Lawless was 28. Winaldo was 29. So Casey Keller was still in England at 28. It was an old team.
Yeah.
And that showed.
Yeah, and there were other things going on with that team.
Oh yeah, that too.
Reportedly.
Allegedly.
No, it's not allegedly anymore. It's been confirmed. John Harkes wasn't there, and there was a reason why.
Yes.
Less said about it, the better. But anyhow, it's just that is fun. I think sometimes we forget that the U.S. men's national team has actually had some performances that are worth watching along. And I would submit that Spain match in 2009 in the Confederations Cup, and even the Brazil match. I mean, the first half that they played against Brazil, they had, what was it, like an 85-yard run for a goal against Brazil. And I remember the British commentators saying if Brazil had scored that goal, we'd be replaying this for years. The 135 minutes of soccer they played, you could even go back to the way they played against Egypt to get into the knockout round where they needed a miracle. I mean, you could probably start in the second half against Egypt and go into the first half against Brazil and say that's the best 3 hours of soccer that the United States has played in the last 15 years. So it'd be fun to watch. I don't even know if those Confederation Cup matches are on YouTube anymore, but that would be fun to watch along as well, because that was kind of a transition point. Carlos Bocanegra was on those teams. You were really starting to see the transition between that group that really got going in the 2000 Olympics, really transitioning into the group that had those nice World Cup runs in 2010 and 2014. It was a nice little mix.
We got into the discussion yesterday, Mike, and I want to get your version of this. When it comes to, and we did the Mount Rushmore discussion. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the men's national team, what goalkeeper do you put as your Mount Rushmore?
Based on performance with the national team or overall career?
How did we classify it, Jason? Did we just do national team, or was it national team, impact, and a bunch of other things?
It depends on how you want to do it. It's like greatest goal, greatest game. It's kind of personal to it.
Because I do look at Casey Keller, who was, I don't want to be rude, but I mean, would it be fair to say what he did in World Cups was rather unremarkable? I don't know if that's fair to say or not. But if you look at the balance of his club career, and also, I don't want to call him a trailblazer, but I mean, he was one of the first really prominent American faces in the Premier League. Casey Keller's got to be on that Mount Rushmore, just for an overall body of work. Brad Friedel would absolutely have to go on that Mount Rushmore. Kind of for the same reason we discussed about, career being impactful in Europe, but also he was a little bit more remarkable in World Cups. Clearly, Tim Howard. I mean, Tim Howard is the George Washington on that Mount Rushmore, no doubt.
Okay, I mean, so then if you had all of your keepers lined up and you could choose only one to be on the overall Rushmore?
It's not even close. It's Tim Howard.
Okay.
And again, because the World Cup is the biggest stage, and he's shown the brightest on the biggest stage. If I'm looking for a fourth, I would make an argument for Tony Meola.
Yes.
That 94 team really kind of captured the imagination of a lot of casuals in this country and a lot of people who weren't that into soccer. And Tony Meola was really one of the faces of that team. He had the goofy haircut. He had the big personality. He was a good interview. And he played well in that World Cup. So I would have no argument against Tony Meola being on that Mount Rushmore. But, man, then, I mean, if we start getting into just outside of international play, like career discussions, I mean, you're going to be naming a goalkeeper of the year trophy in MLS after Nick Raimondo. So how do you leave him out of this mix? But Nick Raimondo was never really with the national team, correct?
Yeah, I mean, when he was always like third exactly. Keeper in.
Yeah, not many appearances.
Yeah, so it's really, really tough. And that's the fun thing about this debate, because it is very, very subjective. But if you're to hold a gun to my head, and we're talking about overall body of work, which includes playing for the national team, playing in World Cups, and what they did in their club career, Tim Howard, Casey Keller, Brad Friedel, Tony Meola. I really struggle to leave Nick Raimondo out of that. I think Zach Steffen could get in that eventually, but and Brad Guzan too.
I was going to say, what about Goose?
Yeah, but again, like with Goose, how many times did he keep goal in big national team matches? Like, he was on the 2010 team that was in South Africa. If you watch the Landon Donovan goal, you see that big polar bear jumping into the pile. He's there, but he didn't play. So but then if you look at his club career, I mean, he's been spectacular with Atlanta United. Really, really hard. Really, really hard. And I think we're lucky. I mean, if there's one, tell me what you think, guys. If there is one position where American-born players have really been able to excel in a lot of top leagues around the world, it's goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
No dispute.
You're even getting down to guys who, in other countries would have gotten more opportunities, like Jurgen Sommer, Ian Foyer. I mean, there's been so many goalkeepers from the United States that, Marcus Hahnemann was another one who went to Europe and played well. It's a position that, maybe it's down to hand-eye coordination, maybe it's down to, guys growing up playing basketball, all kinds of different elements that factor into it, that the U.S. has been, much stronger at goalkeeper than any other position.
Yeah, it's weird. And it might even just have to do, your basketball comparison's very good. But I think it might also have to do with physical attributes where I think a lot of kids in this country, they grow up wanting to play American football or basketball. And as such, their weight training is a little bit different. Their nutrition is a little bit different. They grow up to be bigger than, say, a lot of Europeans who grow up to be leaner so they can run better playing soccer as an outfield player. And that might just be a completely incorrect observation, but I'm just throwing stuff against the wall here. I mean, I think you're probably talking about a lot of American kids who, played soccer recreationally growing up, but did weight training and nutrition in such a way where they'd be able to play American football. And then they probably made the decision when they grew into their bodies that, hey, I'd like to go back to soccer and keep goal. Just a thought.
Well, I think we might have lost John.
Gee, he was sounding so good, too.
Oh, John and technology, it always happens. We're kind of in the same position we've been all week when it comes to MLS. There haven't been any major developments at all across it. I think we're at the point with soccer that we're looking at what Germany's going to do, as they seem to be the ones that are the furthest out ahead of this, and that's in terms of the public and the virus and sport, and they might set the blueprint for how everybody gets back to action.
Yeah, blueprint's a great word. I mean, I think this is going to be looked at pretty carefully on this side of the ocean, and not just by Major League Soccer. I think by all the major professional stick and ball sports leagues, because someone is looking for the formula to get back. And, the NBA was hoping maybe the Chinese Basketball Association could do that. They could not. Major League Baseball was hoping maybe the Korean Baseball League could show them that way forward. They so far have not been able to. So maybe it's going to be the Bundesliga. The one thing I was really gratified to see today, I don't know if you had a chance to read the article in The Athletic. They did a poll of all 26 clubs in MLS. Have you furloughed staff? Have you let anyone go? And for the most part, the answer to that is no, outside of Real Salt Lake and D.C. But the thing that I was very gratified to see, and a lot of clubs have not gone on the record about this, but word has leaked out. Ryan Schmetzer in Seattle has taken a pay cut. Peter Vermes in Kansas City has taken a pay cut. You're seeing a lot of coaches and front office people around the league taking pay cuts to assure that their operation staff does not have to be furloughed or take a pay cut themselves. I think that's huge. That's really, really very inspirational to see a lot of coaches stepping up to the plate to help their staff. We have an owner here in Atlanta who's really stepped up to the plate, and we're lucky there. But not everyone who owns clubs in MLS has the financial resources of Arthur Blank. So, I'm really gratified to see that at least at some clubs, there's been a real attempt to do everything possible to avoid putting your staff in a position where they're out of work in a very, very challenging and difficult time. Hopefully that won't be necessary much longer. And let's see what happens with the Bundesliga. Let's see what happens with Serie A. I mean, they're starting to develop plans to get back playing. It might take longer, but they're working on it. La Liga, same thing. They have said publicly it's not an option to not finish out the season. So, I think it's like we talked about on Stoppage Time yesterday, Jason. I think MLS was looking at closed-door matches as an extreme last resort. I think it's now a little bit less of a last resort. It's looking maybe a little more realistic. But I just want to get matches. I think you're in the same boat. I think the players are in the same boat. The players want to play. And if it's a choice of canceling the season and getting no revenue, or playing on and getting maybe 20 or 30% of the revenue you would have otherwise gotten, you're going to take what you can get. So we'll see. But I think I'm fascinated to see where this goes with the Bundesliga. I think even in terms of training protocols, there are things to learn from that, where reportedly they've been doing some small group training, no groups larger than 10. It's mainly been fitness right now, not a lot on the ball. But I think MLS will study that as they try to send training protocols down to the clubs across the league. So let's see where it goes. But I'm optimistic, and I really hope the Germans can figure it out, because once one major league gets started, I think they're all going to start up subsequently pretty soon after that, depending, of course, on the public health situation and what the government and the health advisors are telling them to do.
Yeah, I think by that point, then they'll at least know how to progress to playing matches. And I mean, it seems like it's about a month of training. It seems like it's then start playing games behind closed doors, and bringing the fans back will be, much more on the overall local governments and the greater conversation about this. But there are ways potentially to get games underway in the interim as everybody kind of starts to step back into normal life when that's safe to do.
And like you said yesterday, MLS has got a lot of time. They've got the rest of this calendar year and potentially into the next calendar year. It's not like Major League Baseball where they've got to have everything done, say, in November. I mean, MLS can play all the way through the holidays and into early next year and take 6 weeks off and start the 2021 season in mid-March. I mean, there's a long way to go. I don't think there's going to be any rush to cancel a season until it gets to the point where there's just no other way. And if that means starting in August, if that means starting in September, I think they'll do it.
I do
but
too.
hopefully it's not going to be that long. I'm optimistic it won't be that long.
Yeah, it's so tough to read, and I think we're at a point where we just don't have all the information, and we're all kind of waiting to see what happens over this next 3 weeks, 4-week period, and then I think we'll know by that point. We'll kind of know at least, does it have to get pushed off to the fall, or is there a pathway to getting back on the field in the summer? And we don't know yet. It's so early. We'll have to see. Germany's kind of in a different place entirely with this virus, so they're going to be able to get out in front and potentially set that pathway for everybody who's going to start playing again. This is how you can do it, and this is how you can do it safely.
Yep. Yeah, totally right. I'll be very, very interested to watch it.
All right, we'll be paying attention to the Tailgate Challenge. I wonder if anybody else is going down with your kind of theme today.
Yeah, I think Mike Bell's doing crab legs. I'm almost positive.
Okay.
I mean, it's Good Friday, so I know we had a couple people tweet in that they're doing a butterfish fry today. So it's Good Friday. I think it'll probably be seafood oriented. I think Bo's doing ribs. Carl was brining something, I think a whole chicken. So, we'll see. But I love seafood. I don't mean to offend John, but I think the scallops and the oysters and the lobster tail will be just fine with me.
Yeah, no,
it's all yours, dude.
All right. Well, good luck on the grill.
All right, guys. Talk to you next week.
We'll catch up with you soon. All right. We're going to get back into the timeline of craziness from Europe and Lionel Messi. We talked about his Inter statements, which are one thing, but let's get into the Ronaldinho segments now.
Yes. So since you knew more about this, and I like to hear your Messi takes, What's the since I know it? Go ahead, and I want to hear your perspective and your take on this.
Well, there's no take. I mean, he just said he didn't pay Ronaldinho's bail. he didn't pony up the money for Ronaldinho to get out of jail. There's no take.
Didn't do it.
Like, he just said he didn't do that. Could somebody he knows have done that? Maybe.
Oh yeah.
There's still ways that happen.
That's like a coach saying that I have not had any discussions with Team X. That does not mean that Jimmy Sexton, your agent, has not.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it could have been handled, on his behalf. We don't know. Ronaldinho, we talked about it earlier this week. So, Messi and Ronaldinho very close during their time at Barcelona, but Ronaldinho also maybe not the best role model for a young Lionel Messi. The Daily Mail has a piece kind of going through this, and I mean, Ronaldinho is a player. He's a hard one to judge in where his career, stands as one of the all-time greats. I think individual talent, he's probably one of the most talented people to ever step on a pitch. But his career, he didn't do everything that he could have. There's reasons why. This is actually let's see. Okay, it was published in April. So it kind of goes back. I think it was after he was initially arrested in Paraguay. He's had a lot of ups and downs. And it's a different kind of up and down than what Diego Maradona went through. But there is some similarity between two incredibly talented players that, for whatever reason, were not able to give you everything that they possibly could have. The final straw at Barcelona, it sounds like, for the club, was Ronaldinho and Deco showing up to training drunk. I mean, you're drunk coming out to train, and at that point, and this is when Pep Guardiola was with the B team, but was in the discussions to become the first team manager. That actually started pretty early. There was a point where Frank Rijkaard even invited Guardiola to become part of the first team staff because it was kind of obvious that Pep was going to be the guy. Jose Mourinho was turned down for that job. It's going to be Pep. Well, Pep hears these things. And it's like, I don't want those two guys who are close with Messi to be a bad influence on him. They're showing up to training drunk. I mean, Alexander Hleb talked about this in 2008. He said that was the final straw. Yeah, that would be it.
Yeah, that'd do it.
That would do it. Ronaldinho went to Milan after leaving Barcelona. So it's not like it completely fell apart for him, but he was not the same player at Milan at all. And conditioning is a big part of it. Carlo Ancelotti said, the decline of Ronaldinho hasn't surprised me. His physical condition has always been very precarious. His talent, though, has never been in question. And for so long, his talent was so good that he could show up to training drunk, that he could go to the nightclub and spend the night at the nightclub, and his talent would get him by. But as you get older, your body doesn't recover the same way. So it's just not going to happen. This is crazy. I had never heard this. So in 2011, there was an offer on the table for Ronaldinho to come to Blackburn. And it would have been incredibly lucrative. And this was at the time that Blackburn, I guess, was throwing around a ton of money because they were trying to sign David Beckham at the same time as well when he was with the Galaxy. Ronaldinho didn't go to England. He went to Brazil. He ended up playing in Mexico as well. But just all kinds of things. I mean, he was at Flamengo, but Flamengo didn't pay him for 4 months. He sued the club. He's able to rip up his contract. He goes to Atletico Mineiro. He went to Querétaro in Mexico, which was kind of fun to watch him in Mexico at this stage. And then Fluminense in Brazil. And at 35 is when he stopped playing. Just the what-ifs with Ronaldinho as a player are wild. If he had not poisoned, Pep Guardiola and Barcelona against him. And if he had stayed at Barca at that time when Pep was coming in and found a way to fit into those teams, good grief. With Xavi and Iniesta becoming the legends that they became, with Messi growing into a incredible player in this generation, it would have been interesting to see if he could have fit, if he had kept his head and he had worked hard enough to be part of a Guardiola team, if they could have made that work. The what ifs are wild with Ronaldinho's career.
Mm-hmm.
Even at Milan, I mean, he wasn't an older player at Milan. If he had been able to stay sharp and contribute with great Milan teams at that time.
You look at someone like that, and it's a dueling thought in my head where someone like Ronaldinho, you are incredibly impressed and you have those mouth open moments when you're watching, but at the same time you have that wondering of the what ifs, Well,
no, when you're watching the highlights, you're not thinking what if. You're thinking how do that.
Yeah, and it's like if you didn't have instances like if he didn't party as much, if he didn't do, if he wasn't out and about and enjoying life and was just a straight up footballer, how much more he could have accomplished.
Yeah, amazing. It's interesting to think back as to what he could have been, because as great of a player as he was, we didn't see all of what he could have been. Personal demons, lifestyle, lots of different things, but on the ball in his prime, Ronaldinho is as good as it got. Just an unbelievable player and could do things that blow your mind.
Yep. Let's see. What else is on your mind this morning? There's a couple of other things, and I feel like one of them, I feel like I should put the bat signal out to Jarrett to talk about. What's going on with the SPFL.
There's multiple things going on there then. Celtic has announced that their players and staff will take pay cuts. What is the situation with Scotland at this point that's out there?
The vote on whether or not to relegate a particular side, and I've got to get the wording right when it comes to Partick Thistle. And that's why I wanted to bring Jared into this and figure out if 2/3 of all of the sides voted one way or the other, one team would be relegated, and that particular side, Partick Thistle, would take the whole thing to court and fight relegation, and it would impact all of the divisions. And that was what I was debating, bringing Jared into the discussion this morning and sending out the bat signal.
Well, he might be working from home, first off. So let's save that. We can get him on to talk about it or do a recorded soccer over there, what have you. The lay of the land in Scotland from a very basic perspective. Celtic is financially good, not great in all of this. But they're a lot better off than most. We've talked about this from the Aberdeen perspective and how even a club that has no debt like Aberdeen, they're getting hit by this. Rangers at one point months ago was talking about needing a cash infusion to finish the season.
Yep.
Most clubs in Scotland are in a bad financial place. Period. Just before this. This has accentuated it. You've got to the point now that there's an argument to award, and we talked about this with other leagues, to award prize money now because teams need that cash today to pay bills, as opposed to waiting until the end of the season, because some clubs might not be able to wait that long. They need the money now.
And the update from the Daily Record, from the article that they've posted this morning, Rangers want the season to continue when safe to do so, but prize money handed out to clubs now. Their proposal has been booted out of the discussions with Ibrox chiefs accusing the league of bully boy tactics. And the resolution on the table is to end the Championship, League One, and League Two season now and decide places based on an average points per game basis, with the Premiership in line to follow suit later in the month, which would mean Celtic is crowned champs, Hearts are relegated, and then Dundee United comes up and Partick Thistle takes the drop to the Championship. All 42 clubs have to cast their vote by noon Eastern Time local, so 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so they can decide what to do with the remainder of this season. So that's where they are with that.
There's a report out of Argentina, and it's involving Atlanta United. It's a little complicated. I'm going to try to get the basics of this. Pity Martinez on Instagram was angry with... Let me get it. Hold on. The club he started at as a kid, and... make sure I get this right. It all revolves around training payments, and we know when transfers are made, you see training payments delivered to clubs where players started, and there was a suit from this club to get money from Atlanta United because they made the transfer fee to bring him in from River Plate, and now I think Atlanta United owes $140,000 to this club in the next 30 days. And Pitti was not happy about it because he said, let me translate this. Hopefully they tell FIFA that at 14 I stopped playing soccer because of them, for negotiating the pass of a boy who only wanted to get to Buenos Aires to succeed and help his family. Shame, they always cared more about the money than the dreams of many boys from Mendoza. They never gave me anything, all the efforts of my old men. So basically he's angry because this club that he did not have a good relationship with, that didn't further his career, is going to get money because of his career. And I believe the club is... it's in Mendoza, Empleados de Comercio de Mendoza. I could be wrong on that. It's not a major club. It's not a first division club. It's not, a club that is winning championships in Argentina. But that type of money would be very important to them. So I understand why they're going for it. But I understand Pitti's anger and saying that they don't deserve it because they hurt his career, not helped. So the posts were deleted. It's probably going to be, I don't know at this point. It sounds like that the club went to FIFA and was able to achieve getting this, award set up. So we will see where this goes. It's part of the business behind the scenes. It doesn't come to light very often because you don't have many situations like this where a player, had a bad relationship with a club that helped develop them. Usually, players want to see the clubs that help develop them make the money that, they can get off of these situations because it helps the next generation. But this is a whole different conversation. This is a much more complicated one.
Yeah, president of the club, further down in the article, Guillermo Pereira, said in an interview with Radio Club Octubre, the entire province is repudiating what he did, and this is translated. So I think something made him think. He never remembered the club in which he was formed. We are entitled to this money. FIFA says that is what you have to pay the institutions, but there is intention that money does not come. So that came from the president of the club.
Yeah, and we don't know the whole situation between the player and this club, but Pitti says he almost quit playing because of this club, and they did nothing to help him and made things worse. So it's a tough situation all the way around. The solidarity payments and training payments don't take those things into account, and that's something that I don't know if they're actually going to ever be able to take into account. But yeah, I get it. If you're unhappy with a place that you played, and especially as a kid, and you don't feel you were treated right, to for that club to make money off of the back of your hard work when you were there. I don't know how long, but it's a percentage of a transfer because it's a large transfer. It's a fairly large amount of money in this case. That's why you're talking about the amount that you're talking about, which I think is around $140,000. Yes,
right.
Because it was a large transfer. But yeah, if he was there, only in his early days and it didn't end well, I get the frustration. This stuff's complicated because clubs around the world invest in young talent to. Oh, and in a lot of different ways, either develop that talent and sell them on as a professional, because youth clubs around the world are not set up like they are here. A youth club here is not functioning in that way. Clubs around the world do, because that money that comes in that they've invested in young talent helps grow the club, helps further the club. So it's important to clubs to have that mechanism. But you get into situations like this where you also have clubs that don't treat their young players well at all, and young clubs that have bad relationships with their players and don't do the right things for their players. And this can happen where that club is going to be rewarded for Pithy Martinez's work, and he doesn't want them to be rewarded for it. I get it.
Right.
I don't know if there's actually a way to make that stand, though. So
yeah.
We'll probably hear more from it, but this is out of Teise in Argentina.
And we were talking in hour number one about the championship and everything going on there. 6 writers from The Athletic, and I guess this is our almost daily plug, that if you do not have your Athletic subscription, they've been doing some quality work, and they've also pulled some stuff out from behind the subscription wall in the coronavirus time that we're living in right now, so you can get an idea about the writers and everything that they're doing. 6 writers for The Athletic went and did a deep dive into the 71 clubs in the EFL, and there are a couple of things that have been discussed about EFL teams. Jason, like you said, concerns about the survival of individual sides, especially when you have teams like Macclesfield and Southend United who have repeatedly over the last year not paid players on time. Mm-hmm. Fears that advance payments from the EFL and the Premier League will lead to financial shortfalls at a later date. Clubs in Leagues 1 and League 2 leaning toward the option of ending the season now is on the table. Complaints about a lack of insight from the government and football governing bodies about when or how matches will resume, and owners braced for, as something else we've talked about, a depressed transfer market and a significant drop in the value of their players. And I wanted to get to the one element where they were discussing League 1 and League 2, since we had talked about the championship this morning. And after the amazing dive that they did in the championship, League 1 and League 2, this is from the article. Murmurings of a scenario where this season is left to lie and clubs concentrate instead on making sure next season runs smoothly. The chaos that would cause in deciding promotion and relegation is untold, with implications for the Premier League and the Championship. But the argument about the integrity of competitions carries little weight with those worried about basic survival. There's a sense of football changing forever and not necessarily for the better.
Well, no, the last part's right. What I'd like to hear is why they want to end the current season, because my guess is they want to end the current season so they can sell players. Because that would be the quickest revenue you can bring in.
Yeah.
If you're waiting to finish the current season, you can't sell players, so you can't bring in that revenue, and you don't know when you're actually going to be able to play games and have revenue. Lower division teams aren't getting that TV money that the Premier League, Bundesliga, the rest are. So they have a different set of needs. That's why in Scotland, and has it been officially done, that every league below the top flight has ended their season? Or was that just still on the table?
That's on the table, and I think that's what this noon deadline is all about.
Okay. So lower divisions don't have the TV money that they're worried about. They would rather have the season end and sell players because that's how they think they can bring in revenue. The problem is I don't know how many clubs are going to be in positions to buy players. And this is where governing bodies have to try to think about the best for big clubs and little clubs. But they live in different worlds, and I don't know if that's going to be possible. I don't think in the Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, top flight divisions that they're as worried about competitive integrity as they are about TV payments. I think that's the driving force behind wanting to continue the current season. But how is it going to work if lower divisions don't finish their season and then are not able to legally do a normal promotion and or relegation, but the top flight divisions do? How do you reconcile that? I don't know. The longer that people make bold statements and fight it out publicly and run to the press and say a bunch of wild things, and the longer that things are, see gasoline thrown on top of them, the harder it's going to be to reconcile anything and create a pathway forward.
The Daily Record says clubs have until 5 p.m. local time to decide on whether to call the lower leagues early and grant the SPFL the power to do the same in the Premiership at a later date. In the top flight, the Daily Record says we know Rangers and Hearts are voting against, and Rangers would be putting a proposal to pay prize money immediately, finish the season safe to do so. So that's where we are.
We'll see. I'm sure there's going to be a good bit over the weekend on this, the rest of the day. We will share stuff that we've talked about as it gets posted the rest of the day on our Twitter account at Soccer Down Here. Also, we will be doing some stuff over the weekend. I don't know exactly what it looks like. I might do a Q&A on Twitch. We might do a watch along. We might have some more Soccer Files 1v1 kind of stuff as well. So we're going to keep trying to drop as much content for you guys as we can during all of this, because I think you guys are hungry for things to be a distraction. We're hungry to do things that are a distraction. So we will be on top of all that for y'all. If you have any specific requests of things, give us a heads up. Let us know on our Twitter account at Soccer Down Here. Send us a message. You can shoot us an email if you're not on Twitter, soccerdownhere@gmail.com, or send us a message in whatever platform you're on, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, what have you. Let us know what you're thinking, and we will go from there. Thank you for everybody who's watched and listened all week. Thank you to our supporting sponsors like Apolinski and Associates, like Jason Wright Agency. Thanks to all the local businesses who are out there still, finding ways to be creative and deliver and distribute product to customers and also keep their staff going. Like our friends over at Wild Heaven, who've got a number of things going on. Their new beer, Fauci Spring, is available. People have already bought it and say it's very good. Yep. All kinds of stuff is going on, and wherever you can support locals who are trying to do things going forward, please do so. But more than anything, stay safe and stay home and do what you got to do to take care of you and yours. And we'll all be back together as this weekend goes with some content, and we'll be back in the normal time slot on Monday morning. So have a good weekend. Much platiel.
Much platiel.